We can go.
So the first question, if I'm on, what should be the critical elements of an effective and inclusive early learning strategy for our province? We'll get the first report, and then we'll get those who want to add their voice. I'm going to just jot down some points on this board over here, but as I said, I will collect your other comments as well to make sure it is quote-unquote all-inclusive reporting. So.
Perfect. So our group right over here had a lot of ideas. I'm only trying to represent just a few of what was said. But we think that education level is one of the primary issues. So a lot of ECE workers may not have enough of awareness of what is normal development and what may be abnormal. So there's a few issues surrounding that. I think the availability of training, being able to access good quality training wherever you are is one issue. And I think there's also an issue as well is that sometimes we do have ECE workers who are very well trained, but those who may not be trained, you may see a lot of high turnover amongst staff as well, so making sure that we are providing accessible training and that we're retaining our high trained staff. And I think the second issue, as well as just issues of navigating the system, there may be a lot of programs and services out there, but for parents who may be at risk, being able to navigate the systems and services without feeling like there's a stigma attached, we thought those are some of the key factors. So that's it for now.
Okay. Anybody else wants to add to that, those comments?
I'll go chew my carrot. I'm feeding my brain. I ordered cookies. We also had a lot of discussion in our very animated discussion. And we talked a lot about what I'll call professionalizing the profession. So early childhood education, giving it, giving it the respect that it needs as a profession. And that needs to happen on a lot of different levels, from how it is promoted as a career choice to curriculum and the value that it's given in the sector, both in terms of compensation and benefits and valuing the work that goes with that. We talked about, a strategy needs a champion or champions. People who can really influence, particularly at the political decision level, so we really need some buy-in there, not just lip service. We talked about a strategy really needs a public education media campaign. Unfortunately, I don't think most people out there realize. I think we all love our children dearly, but I don't think the majority of us realize how critical those first 4 years are.
What would be the key message of that campaign?
Well, I think some of the, I guess for some conversation, we have a lot of really good research out there. We have a lot of good critical information, so getting some of those key pieces out. We hear a lot about, your attachment and reading to your child and all these kinds of things, but I guess really amping that up a bit and being a little bit more specific about it. We need parents. One of the ladies at the table spoke eloquently, I guess, about up until 2005. There was a very active parents advocacy group. I can't remember now what you said the name of the coalition of parents, Child Care Coalition, and it seems like that group has really been on some years. So we really need to support our parents out there to have some venue, I guess, to find their collective voice. And we need someone to network the networks. There's a lot of networks out there that directly or indirectly could feed into an early child care strategy and certainly build on some of the other initiatives that are happening. But we're all busy people, and we all got little things that we're trying to do on the side of our desk, and we know that we all know how challenging that can be to add other things up to the side of your desk, unless you're retired and then you can become an advocate. So I guess we need some leadership attached to this, hopefully, I guess, through the Pratt Foundation to kind of, organize the collective of networks out here that I think can really help to move the agenda forward. So I don't know if there was anything else that anybody wanted to add.
Very good. Thank you very much. Another table at this point. Sam.
We had a wonderful conversation at our table as well, and a lot of it centered on families and vulnerable families, and so we were saying that we felt that outreach needs to be a critical component. It's fine to have a wonderful system, but if people can't get to the system for whatever reason, even if it comes down to plowing the sidewalks so you can push a stroller and have 2 kids to get to the center. We talked about the question about accessibility for non-working parents who are on income support and things like that would need to be addressed, because we heard last night about how it's not just the quality of the program but the quantity of the number of hours that children attend. So although we are saying that family resource programs play a critical role and they're a critical element in this, that we want to be able to make sure that children get the quantity of hours as well as that they would need to have.
Christine, can I just start stopping on that?
Yeah.
At this point, the non-working families that you mentioned last night, today,
Yeah.
We talk about and gloss over. Your knowledge of the Newfoundland experience, why does that remain,
well, I think,
as it is?
Yeah, again, what that is for people who don't understand is, or people aren't familiar with it, is that child care subsidy is available to people who are eligible for reasons of income, but also that they would either working or in training to avail of child care subsidy to help offset the cost of fees, or if they have family support reasons or child development reasons. But there's no kind of preventative or proactive or just universality of that system. So if you're on income support and you're not working or training or going to school, you are not eligible to get a subsidy for your child to go to a regulated child care setting. So when we talk about, if this is a truly universal type of approach, then there's a big pocket of people who aren't going to be able to avail of it if their fees attached.
And I was asking you a related question. Based on that as you describe it, is there within the policy community, in government or elsewhere, that recognize that and are wanting to work on that issue?
See how many of my former bosses are in the room.
I'm one.
You are one, yes. I think people recognize that, but it's a matter of money, right? How much, already the subsidy is a huge portion of the budget for childcare. So, you have to make decisions about where's the best place to spend the money. So, right now the subsidy is to help people, and we had this conversation too. If you look at childcare as a labor force, from a labor force perspective, then that's where your money's going to go to make sure people are well trained. If you look at childcare as good for children and the importance of the early years, then your money goes somewhere else too, right? So, and then we'll take out, how much I hate to be in front of the microphone. So, but we were talking about things like we have to be prepared if we're flinging the door wide open for everybody to come in. Services like, and we're looking at 0 to 6, and that's huge. We're talking about Healthy Baby Clubs, for example. That is a targeted program. Is that the type of thing? Are we going to open that up for everybody? And if we are, then where's the, that's a huge implications, financial costs. So we were having, I guess, more of a philosophical discussion about just going down that road, opening it all up. Yes, everybody should be able to avail of FRPs. Yes, everybody should be able to avail of early childhood programs. But then should everybody be able to have Healthy Baby Club services? They should. There's that money going to be there. And then one other thing that I wanted to make is that we had quite a lively discussion about which department. If we were to talk about an integrated system, and the Department of Education, and there were some reservations around the Department of Education being that integrated ministry. And we came to the conclusion that all of our departments have baggage with the community, in terms of their experiences with collaboration and so on. So it's difficult to know what's the best. And we were even talking about how the Department of Education, and boy, you can really tell I have my government hat off now, but if we have an early childhood learning division in the hallway right here, and we have a school planning division in the hallway right here in the Department of Education, and schools are still being built without space for early childhood education, then we need to have integration within the Department of Education itself first before we can go further, right? So, anyway, I know we had a bunch of other wonderful pearls of wisdom, but
Okay. Does anybody have any compelling element they want to add? Former politician in the room.
Just to demonstrate inclusion, I can do from here. Just two things, I guess. One, very much similar to what was said around. For us, it was to ensure that nothing was a cookie cutter approach, so that it's contextualized to the province, to the communities, to the needs of the families and the children. We also said that we should, whatever an early learning center looks like, it should have nutrition supports, whether that's a breakfast program, whether that's a lunch program, which would include the parents, and we should start thinking about food security in those centers. Community gardens, community kitchens, and start with an evaluation framework, says the evaluator, from the outset, and appropriately funded. If you want to know, it's no good knowing what the indicators are if you haven't started at the very beginning, the minute it starts. So that everybody, you have a framework, you know what you're looking for, you have money to do it and monitor it. And finally, we said,
who and how is that best done? The development framework, as you see.
It depends on who you have around your table. So if you're setting up because we talked about setting up a provincial steering committee.
Yep.
So you have a provincial steering committee, and you should either have enough money to hire someone to do it right, and I mean that, and I say that and I'll say it again, with enough money to hire to do it right, or you have someone at the table whose expertise this is. Because you can't, one of the things that you want to be able to demonstrate is that the outcome, not only you need to know what the indicators are, determine what you're going to use to measure, and then be able to measure it. Because government, that's what we all need to do. All of your early learning strategies, those paragraphs didn't just happen by accident. So we need to ensure that that's there. And I guess our last comment was, it's not just about qualified staff, and I'm sorry if this doesn't sit well with some people, but it's about quality staff. And as someone at our table said, it doesn't matter whether you have a PhD or you have no education. If you can smile at that child who comes in every day and be responsive to them and their family, then it doesn't matter what your qualifications are. It's the harder thing to identify, but we have to ensure that we are sensitive to qualified and quality in our staff.
Okay, so anyway, we've recorded that. I think that's a good setup, and happy to answer even question number 3. He's kick us off when we get there. So I think what we'll do now is go to number 2, and then we roll back or forward. We can do that. So question number 2, if I can just read it out, so we'll all have it. Which key stakeholders have to be involved in both designing and implementing the strategy as we see it? And what role should they play? So maybe I can ask. Go ahead. Oh, you go ahead. That's fine.
Okay, well, the one thing we felt was parents' input, because if you're going to be developing these services, programs, and that, if you don't get the parents' input of what their true needs are, then really you're putting money to that, right?
Yeah. So just then on role or the process question here, obviously consulting
Yes.
and start involving them as we proceed through this process. If I read you right, okay.
And then, well, we identify things for all the parties listed on question 2.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Lots of great discussion on stakeholders, but I think the one thing that our group came to a consensus on after we talked about it is for us the main stakeholder would be the children.
Okay.
And their role in it is to be the focus. of any strategy or plan that's put forward. So that kind of carried on through all of our conversations. We named a lot of what people have already discussed when they've come up here. We talked about the parents, of course. And when we're talking about the parents, we're also referring to practicalities and behaviors. What are their working needs, or some people are doing shift work, community needs. We talked about them in municipalities. What are the needs in different areas? So our list of stakeholders was very, very long. So we kind of went back to the beginning and thought maybe we need to look at this from a perspective that it starts with the children being the focus. We refer to the research, and we refer to all of those good components that we know that every child in our province needs. And then we start branching out to the stakeholders and start bringing people in as we start to develop this type of framework, because it's not going to look the same in any part of the province.
So it's a child focus, child center.
Yep.
That's where we begin, that's where we end.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we talked about things like bringing even the parents who are not parents yet, because quite often parents become engaged and interested in childcare when they've had children. But we've talked about engaging the general public through town hall meetings, getting the messages like the information from the foundation, getting it out there earlier, getting it out there and keeping it out there continuously so that it is on the forefront.
Good, thank you. Anybody else?
I just wanted to make sure that we put municipalities as a stakeholder, as we haven't really explored that at all, in terms of what the role is of municipalities for their community infrastructure.
That's a question I was going to actually ask Marie, and wearing her former hat, because I hadn't really, it doesn't surface very much in some of these discussions. What would be your take? How? Yeah. Municipality piece here.
I mean, we all know that here in the province, the quote-unquote social services, education services are not a responsibility of the municipalities. But if you can certainly enter into their service delivery framework in a number of different ways. I mean, they too are looking to attract workers to their municipalities. And as well, particularly I will tell you, in St. John's, they just developed a whole new division or department on community engagement. And they also are, if you think about it, they do deliver a number of recreational services. So they do offer, some of them do offer childcare. I think there are a number of avenues in. I think you will first get that that's not our responsibility. We're not all that interested. So, but I do think that one of the key issues would be the driver around childcare. And now I have so I can speak.
Okay.
Because I am a former politician and I know what happens when you get the mic. There's two things. I know it's been referenced already. We really felt at this table that there needs to be one policy framework and one department. And not that it should be put under an existing department, but that there should be a new department. There should be a new department, and it could be called whatever. The key in relation to the new department is if you take it to a new department, it takes it away from the pecking order. So it's not education is more important than early childhood education. It takes it away from, we can't put enough money in it this year, can you put money in? So it becomes a critical element and focus of one new department. And the only other thing we said on this one, what we said, similar to what others said, was go beyond the average stakeholder when you're trying to identify what it is you want. And my example was, and I'm going to reference this because this was also said. So, granted, I wrote the text. I think it's great, but that's just me. But one of the things that was said here is if you look through the paper and look at the visuals, you have to be able to see yourself. So if someone picked this up now, they see what looks like a loving family, traditional family. And no, I did not say this. This was said at the day when you said I didn't say. I agree with the person who said. But you need to be able to see somehow represented a parent with a disability or a child with a disability or an Aboriginal child or an Aboriginal family, so that anyone who wants to pick it up says, oh, this must be about me too. And to that end, so going beyond the average stakeholder is, it's not just those who likely would come. How about those, for example, who are down at Choices for Youth who wouldn't come, but you need to go then? So ensuring that when you're consulting and designing, they go beyond the average stakeholder.
Thank you. So I know there are lots of other stakeholders, obviously the private care operators to the educators, just as you named. So it's the whole spectrum. So we're not limiting, you know, the fact that we have them all up there. I think that's a given. But the issue then is how those perspectives get integrated into, as Marie said, and others, you know, the one policy approach here. So how do you really bring them together in roles and, you know, within those stakeholder groups, you know, how do you get them to engage with the next stakeholder, that it isn't totally being, you know, driven from, shall we say, the top. In fact, this thing is, you know, has a family-based, you know, child-based approach here. Because other than that, you know, we're good here in Newfoundland, you know, great government-led policies. But they don't not necessarily resonate at the end of the day. So, you know, so that's why I say in terms of stakeholders, some initial, you know, the foundation is certainly a potential integrator, who are others that you see really playing a very active leadership role.
John, I just wanted to mention, we have municipalities there and we have a cross-road community engagement. I think municipalities can also play a role in rolling this out, being a vehicle in which it can be rolled out. So I see them as being even more critical, or more, critical to it than engaging the community.
We also talked a lot about the community itself being a stakeholder in terms of, you know, if you get a child in the early years, that child is going to contribute to society throughout the rest of his life. Right? So if we can do, picking back on to the question number one, in terms of a public campaign, that's what that probably
One thing that came up later in our discussion, not in this context, was newcomers and returning expatriates harnessing their expectations. Because those who have been here tend to look at the status quo with what's possible, and others who have experienced better systems, better services, can often better express what we all need.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I work with Francophone organizations and in regions where we do have newcomers. A lot of them come from Quebec and France, and their level of expectation in terms of early childhood services compared to the average Newfoundland or Labrador.
So how do they deal with that today?
Same way everybody else in the province. So scraping together as much resources they can and offer without any global framework.
And I think some of the most vulnerable parents don't even realize that they have the ability, or even that it's almost like a privilege that they could access some of these services. They see it as something that it's not even, not even in reach for those guys.
So in terms, say, looking at industry, the newcomer example, for industry, obviously the oil, gas, you name it. I mean, there's a lot of new employers coming to this town. Has anybody had any discussions with them, on the same question, their expectations? Because obviously they're enticing employees right around the globe here, young families, and this is a settlement issue for sure.
Are any of them offering services?
Yes.
Workplace takers or anything like that?
Yeah. So anybody have any feelings or insight on that particular, that sector? Okay, well that's, to me that's sort of a gap of knowledge that we need to plug in here. And I think that, again, could be an advocate for change. Yes?
I was going to say, that's under parents as well, but I've talked about the role of the father, and making sure they feel welcome and invited to go together with the services that are provided. And also many grandparents who are taking care of children not because it's their desire, but because their children can't afford services, making sure that their voices are being heard as well.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question and we'll see what else we So the next one was on, next steps, as to how we move forward on assuming the goal is early childhood education / learning. That's, all inclusive, meets all the needs. But how do we, what are those needs? How do we know we've reached them? How do we know the strategy or whatever approach we come up with is going to work or is working, should work? And I'm going to actually ask Verna, a question to sort of kick this off, because PIs have just gone through this, and they have had to answer every possible question that we could pose. And the Newfoundland, if there's a system that can be redesigned, retooled, or bypassed, or manipulated, or both the positive and the negative, we know how to do it here. So how do you turn, some of that analytical stuff into real positive change? So in terms of PEI, when you were mapping out your approach collectively, what were you looking at as some big indicators to know that you were on the right path?
Well, I guess I was saying to a couple of people earlier, you're a lot more deliberate than we were. When you look at how things happened, there were all these different streams, and then they came together with the new government, and everybody was on the same page. We weren't nearly as deliberate as you're being in terms of trying to get everybody on the same page in advance. So I think you have a huge advantage here, that you are starting now to think about how you, as a group of 60 people, get everybody on the same kind of a page. I think that there are real challenges for sure, but when you look at next steps, you need to have a plan. So how you build that plan, in PEI there were two parts to it. One was the kindergarten consultant, who took a look at, what are we really going to do about kindergarten? Because once you make a decision around that, then you have to take a look at what you're going to do about everybody else. So I think, that kind of two-step process worked for the provincial government. And in both of those processes, surveys and parent involvement were key. So surveys online, anybody could go into the website and fill out a survey. I even did it as a grandparent. So you kind of get a sense of, people can have some kind of an input in there. And then I would think it's just a matter of making sure that you are as ready as you can be, because you don't know when that golden opportunity is going to land, but you've already got a whole sense of all the things that you need to do. So it's like, in 2 years, what are all those things that you'd love to have people talking about, so that if there is a will to do something, everybody is ready to kind of jump in and do their piece. So lots of education.
So now going back to the rest of the groups here, any specific next steps that you saw, and some indicators to know that they were back the right steps there? I'm just gonna,
Yeah. You want to say it?
Okay. Go ahead, Roseanne.
Okay. One of the things, and then you can say yours, is that we were wondering, and it might have already been done, is an inventory of infrastructure. Like, do we know if we were to, have a model roll out, an integrated model? If we were to have an integrated model, is there an inventory that we know of how many schools are able to handle it, or in those other smaller communities, how many municipal buildings and so on we have available to us?
And that, I'm assuming, would be human resources as well.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Okay.
That's what you would say.
Very cohesive table there. Anything in the back? You talked a lot, so you must have come with something.
We said lots of things that others have. The only thing adding to that, and if I've already been said, would be starting immediately with common campaigns. The wonderful work that the foundations have already done, that stage is kind of set. So I think it's up to all of us now to take that information, roll with it, and make sure public is getting informed.
Okay. And there's a delicate balance there as you go out shall we say, too soon, but shall we say, promising world, and the system is not on side, the expectations, and then, you're left in a defensive mode very, very quickly. I hear your point. Maureen, you have?
Yeah. I just want to pick up on the idea of doing a survey, and again, I'm sorry, I've got to say, but I agree, surveys are great, but please make sure if you're going to do a survey, you get someone who designs and knows how to do it. Because otherwise you get a whole bunch of yes/no questions. And I'm so glad that the two experts are nodding their heads, because you get a whole bunch of yes/no questions, and at the end you'll have nothing except yes, no, no evidence. But it was suggested at the table that one of the things for next steps is we've already identified that the province has two very distinct strategies, but they haven't. And the importance of, in an effort to engage government, using those strategies as a step in. So finding what it is that's good about those strategies and using that as the opportunity to springboard the dialogue. And the second piece, which is exactly what Verna said, but in terms of being ready, it was said at the table that be ready with, don't go into government, going into government at this stage with the discussion paper is critical. But if in 6 months or a year, government's ready to talk about it, have the concept. So you have something to respond to, have the ask ready. Yeah.
I'll build on that. We did have a few other points. Linking with other strategies that are already out there, development strategy, build on the environment that's there. And included in that is the same sort of thing, being able to immediately walk in and be available right away to address any criticism, comments, or concerns. So almost have that pre-planning happening where you can preempt a lot of the negativity, criticism, and problems that might be thrown at you to run it on course, that then keeps you on course.
Okay.
If I could add just one thing about those early communication messages, which I think are really important. And the early messages can be, because you folks all know this, but the rest of the population doesn't, how critical that time is between 0 and 3. Like, most people have no idea that is when the brain develops, and that's when language develops, and that is just a completely foreign concept to most people. So those early communications can be around heightening people's awareness of what the issue is, so that when you do have a solution, people at least understand that there's a problem that you're trying to fix.
Good, thank you. That's good. Any other takers? Next steps? I'm sort of on the indicator. I agree, because I've been through a lot of these policy development exercises, and we are only now, we say, all right, these things working. And as Marie said, I agree with her, absolutely. We have to really focus on the evaluation framework to know what we're doing as we go through this, so that we don't get stuck with the model that we know is not working, and 20 years later we're still trying to undo the damage after year 1 or 2. So, but in terms of some of the indicators, just as we start out over the next year. So if we were to convene in a year's time, this same group, the others, and those changes, what would you be looking for to say to next year? So if we were to convene in a year, the team, the child will, you would want to see being achieved 1 year out. And what is it? Yes.
That everybody understands the importance of early learning, and that's not just how it truly is early learning, and changing the message that childcare is the place to drop your child off to go to work.
Okay, so how do you measure that? How would we measure that over the year?
I think if we can educate all the departments on early learning, and so we have government on board, understanding what early learning is, that's a good measurement.
Yes.
We talked about access as well. I'm not seeing the difference between that urban and rural divide. So we're talking about using CBS, sometimes being able to access services due to lots of transportation issues. So we thought indicator of success would be if there's a single mom who's able to access a center, but you're also seeing upper middle class. We also taking their children's services so that it's not a stigmatized type of service that's being received, and that it's acceptable for all.
Yeah, and David, I think Ms. David alluded to the fact that, in next November, we will have the next phase of the early year study, and we will be able to measure, obviously, what is happening with the land. But we would be influencing that necessarily at that point. It is certainly something we can use as a bit of a yardstick and use that information. Tony?
I think success to us in a year's time would mean that the public, the ordinary public, is dialoguing and is understanding what the words mean. That our children need to be given the importance that now we give when someone, as I said to the table here, when someone talks about drunk driving, there's an importance to that dialogue. And you hear that dialogue in all kinds of venues and in all kinds of situations. So I think our measure of success would be that people are talking about this and the value of children and what all early childhood education means with that value is being talked about on an open line, and you're not getting the whole idea of, well, I don't want my taxes increased to pay for daycare, which in the public's view in a lot of cases is babysitting. And all that dialogue has to change, so that value of children and what it means for early childhood education. Our language has to change, and the public's language perception. Just like we change the public's perception of smoking, we change the public's perception of drinking or driving, we have to change their perception of what early childhood education is.
Is that achievable now in 12 months?
Well, I think beginning is achievable. I think if everybody was on board and took their own particular spot and did something with it, I think it's achievable. I think if we all use that language, it's achievable.
Okay. And that's sort of exactly where I was going to end. We have to be, and I said key messages, but, collectively we do have to agree on the terminology that we use professional terminology. We have to make sure does that resonate with the public, yes or no, if not, then we got to make sure we come up with that. Because the politicians will, they relate to that, and making this complicated isn't going to, it's a complicated issue. It's probably the most complicated that any government will have to tackle. But if we make it complicated in its, its design, it will fall flat if even we get that far. Jane?
Can I add a indicator?
Yes.
Okay, I think success would be that there is a strategic framework with agreed upon critical elements, and all three major political parties in this province want to meet with the key developers of it because they're interested in putting it in their election platform.
And the Board of Trade will invite us to speak.
Board of Trade will invite you to speak and
Start conceptual-based outcome.
whatever. It's seen as having substance. It's coherent. People understand it.
I think an indicator of success is going to be how much uptake we've had on this, how much exposure has this paper gotten. We printed 400 copies in our first run, knowing that we're going to have to go back to the printer soon. But in this day and age, nobody reads a hard copy, everybody reads electronic copies. So imagine if everyone in this room tonight went home and emailed a copy, the PDF, the text version copy of this, to everyone on your mail list, and say, mail this out to people you know. How quickly would word get out there and the conversation start? I think we need to be really innovative around how we drive this conversation. And in coming here today, our goal is to start a conversation. And remembering that you are not our audience. You are our stakeholders that access your audiences.
The medium, part of the medium. All right, Michael.
In the short term, some indicators could be level of awareness and level of support for the program. And that would be measured by polling or surveys, scientific surveys, not, push a click on an internet site. In the medium term, we could look at number of centers established and number of students enrolled or children enrolled. sort of kind of an output indicator. And in the long term, you would want the median ones would be output indicators. In the long term, you would want your output indicators.
Yeah.
You know, is the rate of literacy going up? Is the dropout rate reducing, etc.
Yeah, and certainly the long term of the outputs, I agree. Or outcomes, I should say. Any other takers? You all came here today with a certain expectation. Based on what you heard so far, both this morning, this afternoon, and your own discussions, do we have the basis of success in moving forward? Do we stop, regroup, or do we plow it in a positive way, you know, with a direction Kathy's going to speak to some process issues in a second. But do you feel, quote unquote, energized that, yeah, with a focus on this over the next year, we can influence the greater public policy direction by government, by municipalities if need be, by school boards, by others in the next 12/24 months. You know, time is ticking away, and part of the discussion paper said, you know, the provision plan as we see it today, or strategies, are talking, 8 to 10 years out. Many would suggest that's way too long. We have to accelerate this. Do we have the passion to move forward? Can we rely on and work with you to drive this further? Anybody saying yay? Anybody saying nay?
John, are you saying under the leadership of the Pratt Foundation?
I would say we're talking about this. I'm calling them the stewardship role. You know, I know.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to. I think we've done some good work here, and I went away, thoroughly excited last time on this at one of these gatherings, and the one in between, and many other tables. But when we leave and we all go back to our jobs, and then on the side of our desk we try to do things to make a difference, we need, at this point, some leadership and a group that will bring together the stakeholders so that this conversation does continue, and the strategy is created, and the timelines are put in place, and the monitoring is done. Like, it just, I don't want to feel frustrated that we go away with lots of great ideas, but then nothing happens.
And that's, that's the point. So do we have, you think there's the capacity to do that? What are the elements? If there are something missing, what are they? And we need to talk about that, not necessarily, in the next few minutes, but over time. And I think Kathy will speak to some of her thoughts on behalf of the foundation. We know we have the McCain Foundation as our backstop, and her center as a backstop. We have you, and your systems as backstops, but we know there are a lot of interest, a lot of key people who are not in this room today. And not because we didn't ask them, but their agendas are full and obviously couldn't make it. But we will have to reach into that, sure, to move this forward. Any thoughts? Is it just late in the afternoon?
I think we need a plan.
Yeah. Okay, understood. Kathy, you want to?
Right.
You're ready. Okay, right. So we will leave it there. I am going to collect. So I would ask if you would leave your paper. If you feel comfortable with that on the table, I will collect those and for any thoughts, we're going to be emailing back and forth. We will be sending out the draft of the proceedings report. We will ask for your additional comments to make sure we collect and we do this appropriately, so we don't shoot ourselves in the foot before we go out the door. All right, so I'm going to ask Mike to come talk about where the Harris Center sees things going over the next while, and it's and the process that we generally talked about, and then Kathy will do the wrap. Mike.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for your patience and your energy. It's amazing. You're sitting here all day, but you're still expending a lot of energy. So I won't be long. However, it will not prevent me from being boring. So the Harris Center, we have expertise in two areas. One is regional development, the other one is public policy. Regional development, we deal with such things as employment, productivity, innovation, including social innovation, which is what we're talking about here today. The rural-urban split, the role of public secondary education in development, et cetera, et cetera. I'll give an example of something we worked on recently. It was a conference on women in oil and gas. It was great because we had people from Norway coming to tell us about their social programs. Wow, talk about what is possible by humanity when you sit down and think about what you want to do. Wonderful experience. There's nothing they're doing there that we can't do here. It's not based on money. It's based on people sitting down and deciding what's important to them. That was one lesson. The other one was really interesting. I'm a man. When I get on in the workforce, I get on the on-ramp, and I get on the highway, and I get off when I retire. Women get on the on-ramp, fighting traffic to get on, and they have a child, so they get on the off-ramp, so they're out of there for a while. Their child is going to come back, try to get on the workforce in fighting traffic, get off again with their second child. Get off again when an elderly parent needs help, etc. So I got it really easy, right? I get on, I get off, 30 years later. Most women are not all the time. So it's a different, I thought it was a really interesting concept with which to look at our workforce. And so maybe that's something we can adopt here as well. We want to make it as easy as women who need to get off on the off-ramp to be able to get on the on-ramp again afterwards. Napoleon said, there's no army that can stop an ID whose time has come. The rooms was one of those ideas. We started the rooms before oil. Let's not forget, we got oil now, we look at the rooms, we're very proud. The rooms started with Brian Tobin before oil. But we made a really good case for it, and next thing you know, we have the largest investment in heritage in 100 years in this province. Good ideas attract money, attract energy, and make things happen. We are a world leader in distance education at Memorial. People come here to Newfoundland to look at how we do distance education. We can use that system for whatever it is that we want to do here. Somebody said that Europe suffers from too much history. We suffer from too much geography. So we've learned to deal with that over the years. We have a distance system that is second to none in the world. Let's use it. And so we're taking this here today, for example, as an example of how we can extend beyond the boundaries of this room. We need to make sure that what we do is not advocacy. We're not lobbying. I'm not lobbying anybody here. What we're doing is we're informing people. Let them lobby. Once we raise their level of awareness, let them talk to their politicians and say, I want this to happen. Right now, people don't have a vision. There's lots of things we don't have a vision for in this province. We don't have a vision for the fishery. We don't have a vision for a lot of other stuff. We don't have a vision for early childhood education. I think the role of this group is to sit down and think about what we need to do. So I live by the saying of Henry Mencken, the American journalist, who said that some ideas are so difficult, they'll never be solved in a million years, unless we think about them for 5 minutes. And that's what we need to do. We need to stop ourselves for 5 minutes, think about what is it that we want to do here, and let's make a decision. So that's where we are. So Dave this morning outlined where we have come from. And I think on this graph here, we're talking about what we need to do in the next little while. So we've got a year planned out. So we've got 3 or 4 events that we're thinking about, and we've already invited people to speak at some of these events. Some of these people, you need to book them a year ahead of time. So we thought, well, we want these people to come. Let's book them. We'll build an event around them, but we'll put in other things in these events. So we've got Ted Millish coming in sometime in, so between March the 4th and 6th, so mark that in your calendars. And then we have, my glasses, Craig Alexander and Cal Fontaine coming on April the 10th, talking about the economics of childcare. So Ted is talking about the benefits to the brain and society and everything else about early childhood education. Craig and Pierre are going to be talking about the economics of this, so that makes sense. And then in June, the funders group that Kathy and others have mentioned are coming here, so we might be able to tap into the knowledge and expertise of these people to give us some advice as to how we advance early childhood education in this province. Then somebody's going to take all this information over the summer and write something, and that something is going to be a vision, and recommendations for how to bring this vision about. When we have that, we will put that out into the public and say, look, this is what we've come up with. We've looked at this in 50 different ways. This is the best advice that we can give anybody as to how to implement an early childhood education system in the province. So a year from now, we should have something concrete. We should have that vision that we've stopped 5 minutes to look at and develop to present to other people. And all of that is going to be part of a public education campaign. So as Dave is fond of saying, you're not the target, but you're part of the target, but you also are immensely networked. You are very influential in your field. We ask you to turn, when you leave this building, to talk to everybody you can about this, get them involved. We know that when parents hear about this initiative, they'll run to it because there is a real need, both for their children and for themselves. Employers will also come to this. So this is a public awareness campaign. We are all evangelists. We need to go out and talk to people, and we all have a responsibility. So, any questions in terms of where we see the year going? Well, the other thing too is planning these other events, the 3 or 4 events, and we have an event there in January that we haven't themed yet. So we were planning on doing something if we did. But for now, the next event would be sometime in March. We will be looking to you to volunteer as part of program committees to help design these events. We do have speakers coming, but there's lots of other real estate during that day that needs to be filled. So we will be looking to you to help us, design the program for these things. So we will be communicating with you. We have your email addresses. We're like Reader's Digest. Once you get on our mailing list, you never get off. And so we will be communicating with you. And if you're interested in a particular topic, we will take all the information that you've talked about today. The steering committee will use that to come up with themes for each of these sessions, and they will invite you to participate on program committees if you wish. Makes sense? Any questions or comments? If not, John, I pass it back to you.
Actually, I'm going to ask Ms. LeGrow if she would take the podium and allow us to go home.
Here we go again. Thank you. I've been furiously jotting down notes all day, revising notes, what would I add, what would I take away. I just want to make a few comments. I want to have realistic expectations for us all. We are preaching to the converted, I acknowledge that. All of you understand and get it. And I so appreciate that. But I also realize that you're very busy people, that you have work lives that are that sometimes do not permit you to be vocal about this, and we recognize that. We as a foundation are also limited. We are able to provide you with benign leadership. We cannot be seen as advocating or lobbying in any way. We are very strictly confined by Revenue Canada, CCRA, as to what we can and can't do. So we have our own limitations about that. But what we can do is facilitate. What we can do is provide opportunities like this. While a public awareness campaign can be undertaken, it may not always have a name on it, for obvious reasons. And I'll get to that in a second. At the press conference yesterday, somebody asked me why I did this. And there are a number of reasons, I guess, a number of experiences that have brought me to this place. Mostly my involvement in education, and knowing and discovering and learning about children who weren't ready for school, and thinking about the injustice of that. And I still feel very strongly about that. Another experience, a person actually who brought me to this place, and she's not here now, she dropped in quickly at lunchtime, was Margaret, talking about the chaotic lives of the children that she served, and some of you here, especially at Daybreak and at Choices, who would know the lives of these young people and how they have to cope and how hard we work to get them on track, only to send them home for the weekend to start all over again on Monday morning.
And I know that there's something we can do about that. And I know there's so much to do. In fact, I'm frightened listening and looking at all of this. It's a scary prospect. And it doesn't always, it doesn't all end with me. I know leadership could begin with me. I used to give that talk one time about leadership, and it does begin with each of us. But I'm hoping that we can share this with all of you for the reasons that I said earlier about those of us who can and can't speak, and for the various reasons that we can and can't. But together, we are anonymous in that sense. We are creating a groundswell of support. I want to tell you about my visit to Bruce Greenwood School. I walked into that school, and the first thing that I was aware of was a smell. They were cooking lunch. It was spaghetti sauce. It was the most delicious smelling spaghetti sauce I have ever smelled. It was made from scratch. This is what greets parents and teachers, and most importantly of all, children. What a wonderful place, knowing that that you arrive and already you're excited about the prospect of being there. On the day that we were there, a singer had volunteered his time, a little guitar player guy, to come and sing to the children and play with them. And this was for the very little ones, the age 2-year-olds. And grandparents were there to watch the concert along with babies. There were Filipino nannies who were there in this neighborhood who the only time that they could get together and talk to each other was in an environment like this. So they were chattering off in their language, talking to each other. And then the grandparents were there. And it was such a welcoming place. Yes, there were strollers. You could barely get through the corridor. But it was such a warm environment to go into the Family Resource Center and to see how open they were to all parents. There's such a diversity in parenting now. Gay parents, for example. They're as welcome at those schools as single parents. There's no discrimination of any sort. There's no bullying in the school. You walk in there, there's no sense, because the children start at such an early age, that bullying is, because you learn how to deal with your conflicts, and those sorts of things are not permitted. These are the things that I, as just an ordinary, joking public citizen, noticed when I walk in this school. They talked earlier about the stress of the disruptive transitions that take place for little ones going from daycare, kindergarten hell, so they call it, I think it was Boyd, one day in one of our meetings talked about kindergarten hell. How hard that is on children to go to kindergarten and then to go to that other place that you go to when you're not in kindergarten, and then you care after that. To be able to support children in after-school programs to help them with their homework, because we are very busy parents, and sometimes I, would come home from work with my kids. My daughter talked this endlessly about trying to engage in homework after a long, busy day, and everybody's hungry, everybody's tired, everybody's frustrated. Just to have those supports, I just can't imagine how wonderful that would be for a family. So these are the things that I hear. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a very strong advocate of public education. I think our family was in a position to be able to afford private education. I've talked to people in this community, because there are private schools available here, and they occasionally ask my opinion. They don't want to hear it. I don't believe in private schooling. I believe in public schooling. I believe in children going to school with everybody. I believe in equity. I think our children get a better education through inclusion, and thank you, Marie, for talking about, and understanding each other, by being included in and being a part of a system that helps them to recognize then and later on what our community is made up of. I truly feel that my children in particular are better people for having experienced that. So that's some of the reasons why I'm here. Margaret McCain says that foundations are thought leaders, and I really like that expression. There's things we can and can't do, but as thought leaders, we can create the thought. We can create, maybe even help to create and be a catalyst for the vision. But we have to depend on others to help us by delivering it, which is why we need you. We're starting with you, but we have a lot further to go. During our time here today, I spoke with, I don't know if she's still here, I think she probably had to go, Michelle Cohn, who's with the Canadian Union of Public Employees. And we at our table were talking about how do we get this out, because now it's the communication plan. How do we get people talking about this? And knowing that she knows Wayne Lucas, and in my years as a trustee, Wayne and I have had an interesting relationship, both positive and negative. But Wayne, as most of you know, is the leader of CUPE here, and the political leader here in Newfoundland. And already her mind was thinking, well, I can talk to Wayne about it, but you know, there's a labor, what is it called? The Federation of Labor Convention in December. Why don't I see if I can get your booklet on our registration table? As easily as that. So obviously there's ways that we can connect, beginning with this group, but you have networks too. And eventually, without spending too much money, and I'll talk about that in a second, we can get the word out. We are limited by the amount of money that we can spend. How we spend it, and I talked about that before, we can't lobby. But also, there's a limit to what foundations can do when we have to start relying on you folks for your assistance in getting us to where we need to go. I have other handicaps. My educational background being one that people knowing me, that's not always a good thing. And even now, even though it's been, I guess, a good 15 years since education reform here, so people still look at me, turn around, and walk away. Well, you're that Kathy LeGrow. So it is a handicap in some instances that I closed 22 schools. I didn't, but you know, that's the way I see it. I also, people know me, even though this has not been a factor in recent years, that my political stripe is not the same as the government's political stripe. That's a handicap. So when we walked in to see the Premier yesterday, immediately she saw my political stripe. She saw the red and said, huh. In her mind, I could just see it in her face. David, I don't know if you noticed that or not, but it was immediate. And so what am I doing here? What am I doing is joking public to start with, and what am I doing? I'm just here to cause trouble, which I'm not, because I'm passionate and this is heartfelt on my part. But these are handicaps that I carry, to some extent our foundation carries, because people don't understand how foundations work. We can be the catalyst, as I said earlier, we can facilitate, but we really rely on the community to take us where we need to go, and you folks in particular. John said that I would talk about the meeting with the Premier. And we have tried very hard, and with the advice of our focus group that we had in September, and certainly with Marie as well, to be very positive about this. So I don't, and I know some of you work in provincial departments, so I don't want to sound negative. But I think that our government right now, our government in power at the moment, has been inundated with a lot of criticism. And they're just waiting for the next whack. And they just saw us as one of those people. And while I assured the Premier that this was a discussion paper that we wanted them to be as much involved in as everyone else, I don't know whether she heard that message or not. She has good people working with her, and some of them are present in the room. The new Minister of Child, Youth and Family Services is my MHA, which I just found out. I was away, I guess, when he was appointed, when the shuffle happened. But Paul Davis is a wonderful man, and I know I can access him, and I will use that as much as I can. and his staff were with him, and the Minister of Education was there as well. So there are opportunities, but our opportunities rest with you as well as with the rest of the community, and that's why we need you. I contacted the Board of Trade to see if they were interested in having Craig Alexander speak when he comes in March. And it's March or April, anyway, whenever he's here, April. And I said he is the chief economist and senior vice president of the TD Bank. Now, when you think Board of Trade, a bunch of business people want to hear this guy, well, what do you want him to talk about? Well, I said, he's coming to talk to us about the economics of early learning and care. Well, he can talk to us about the economy, but I don't think our foreign folks are really going to be interested in that. That is the big hill, the rock we have to push up the hill, because that's how we feel. Now, Craig is passionate, and he's a good speaker, and all he needs to do is get in the room. And I have no worries about him convincing them that this may very well be a good idea. When we talked to the Premier yesterday, wrongly perhaps, we talked about Quebec. Because that is a dirty word. It's a dirty word, not necessarily to me, but anything that happens in Quebec. And of course, immediately she went to the whole hydropower situation and how we were sort of screwed, for the expression. And so that's where their thinking is. And as was said earlier, there are good things and bad things happening, and not so much bad things, but other things that need to happen in Quebec. And I tried to impress upon her that what we want is a make in Newfoundland system, Newfoundland and Labrador. The story that Dave told you that we heard yesterday about what's happening in the little community in Newfoundland, how the community got together, we do this in Newfoundland. We see a need, and we do our best, because our community, especially our rural communities, are so resourceful. And they just, okay, we'll get together and we'll address this. I remember early on in education, I heard about a project in Seatville where the principal realized that there were a lot of young, teenage, pregnant, and mothers. So somehow that developed into a relationship where all of the social service providers in the Seatville area got together. They got a daycare, they got a family support center, they work with these kids, they work with parents of these kids. Suddenly everybody was on the same page. They were pooling their resources. The little community that Dave referred to earlier, where the school board may not approve of what they're doing, Stephenville didn't care. They just did it. And they made wonderful things happen. And then suddenly, shifts in government, shifts in people, that community, that program doesn't exist anymore. I don't know if any of you here are familiar with what they did, but this was back starting in the late 80s and then certainly well into the 90s, maybe later. It was it was a visionary program. People came from all over the world to see this, not all over the world, but certainly all over the country, to see this program in operation, just because of cooperation with people on the ground. I have that vision for what can happen here, of people working together. That doesn't cost money. That just takes energy, and takes commitment, and takes passion. I hope I'm sharing some of my passion with you. Our challenge, of course, is what's next, and we have that indicated before us. We would like to invite you to be part of the process. As I said earlier, I know you're busy people. I know that one of the things that came up in the discussion is communicate, communicate, communicate. That's important. My daughter has some advice on that as to how to tweet. God knows I'm not one of those people, but she spent this whole time tweeting all this stuff out. So it's all out there in that atmosphere somewhere. But, we will provide you with a little bit of direction, or she will provide you with a little bit of direction on that. But I think what we want to do and what we will do is gather a group of interested people to help us develop a communication and an engagement plan. It will be a group of communicators and engagers, for want of a better term. I don't know, what was the committee you thought it was going to be called first?
Program.
Program.
Yeah.
That's boring.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done enough programs, so we need an action committee now. We need to be like Verna and we've got to be can-do people. This is just going to happen. So we'll be in touch with you about that, but if you want to volunteer before you leave, we would be very happy to hear from you, because we need you. And I think that's probably, unless others have something to say, I want to thank you in particular for being here. It has been wonderful. I know some of you have been here to the 3 events that we've had, and we really appreciate that. I want to thank our board members. They are really engaged people. They're sitting at your tables. I mean, they do this for free. They give up their day and their time and all of that, their time off. for free, and I really, really appreciate that. I don't know if we acknowledged Tommy. Did we earlier, John? Did you recognize Tommy? Yeah. So that's another one of our board members there, of course, cousin Jamie. He says I'm his favorite cousin, so I hope that's true. It's in the family. And of course, my offspring. But I want, and of course I want to thank David and John. We couldn't have done this without them. And right now I want to thank my daughter who's suffering today. Has been suffering for the past week or so with a very bad back. Has gotten up out of her bed to be here today. She didn't want to miss anything. And she's been tweeting away and sharing things and putting things up on the website. Because she has been, when we talk about communication for our foundation, she is at the website, all of this. This is the person. And she does it not only for us, but she does it for our funders working group. And she's an invaluable part of what we do. And I don't say that often up here. Anyway.
And it's okay for Big Brother to clap too, you know.
Anyway.
I knew you wouldn't get to speak on Paul.
Thanks to all of you. And I know we're going to see you again. And thank you, Bernard, for coming. And thank you, Jane, for being a part of this. And I know when you start thanking people, you're going to forget somebody. But just thank you. And thank you all for being my colleagues and friends. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.